Hello everyone, welcome to the lecture 1, which is part of the SWAYAM course titled Aspects of Cultural Studies. The title of this lecture 1 is Cultural Studies, an Introduction, and the focus of this lecture would be on the natures and the characteristics of cultural studies. As you can see on your screen, the objective of this lecture is to acquaint students with the nature and characteristics of cultural studies, to discuss how cultural studies is an interdisciplinary project and method, and to explain how cultural studies investigates into the logic of cultural politics, and this cultural politics is the dialectics of culture and knowledge. Particularly, the students will learn in the beginning of this course, they will learn about the natures and the characteristics of cultural studies, and they will learn how cultural studies employs certain approaches and methods of studies, and how it challenges the traditional subjects or boundaries of traditional subjects and disciplines, and thereby giving birth to what is called interdisciplinary studies or transdisciplinary studies. So, this would be the focus of this lecture, that is lecture 1. When we talk about cultural studies, we begin with the Frankfurt School of Cultural Studies or critical theory, which was founded in 1923 at the Goethe University, Germany, and founded by Karl Grunberg with the financial assistance of Felix Weil, and how scholars like Walter Benjamin, like Horkheimer, like Theodor Adorno, like Herbert Marcuse or Habermas and others would try to theorize critical perspectives into the new culture of media and communication in Germany. So, it is from their theoretical insights into the cultural traits, which was predominantly about new media, new technological culture like radio, like TV, like other technological means or mediums of communications in Germany. So, they would study or research into all these new cultures in Germany and come up with the idea of culture industry, how these media would try to be authoritative, try to generate rules, also try to maintain the rules by constant persuasion through media, and make the people only the passive perceivers of knowledge, ideas, information. So, this would be the Frankfurt School at the Goethe University, which would for the first time study into the political matrix or the cultural politics of media communication and the kinds or natures of knowledge that were being produced in Germany. Again, in 1964, the ideas of cultural studies, that is culture as culture industry, would percolate into England, particularly to the University of Birmingham, where you have the birth or emergence of Birmingham Center for Contemporary Cultural Studies, or what is known as BCCCS, sometimes it is called CCCS, where you have Stuart Hall, Richard Hogarth, E.P. Thompson and Raymond Williams. These would be the cultural critics or theorists in England. This come up with this idea called cultural studies, taking culture to the common people and reading not only the technological institutions or communications, means of communications, but culture of working class people, culture of community, colonies, spaces. So, that is how, my dear students, cultural studies will have the historical genesis starting from Germany to Britain, and obviously, as you know, how it has expanded into many other countries, including America, Australia, Canada, even in India. So, in today's class, what we need to do at the beginning of this course is to understand the natures and the characteristics of cultural studies, so that from the beginning you have certain preliminary ideas, certain clear and confident ideas about what cultural studies is or are. Primarily, my dear students, when we begin our discourses on cultural studies, two things pop up very prominently in our minds about cultural studies. The first thing is how cultural studies came as a reaction, as an opposite force against the traditional definition of disciplines and subjects or areas of studies. In other words, cultural studies would be perceived as anti-disciplinary, not believing in the traditional boundaries, rules, regulations, formulations of respective disciplines. The second idea pops up in our mind when we talk about cultural studies is its emphasis on cultural analysis. That is, cultural studies, or for cultural studies, culture is the subject or the object or the tool of analysis. So, in cultural studies we perceive, we interpret, we analyze, we critique, we formulate, we define, we theorize, we historicize our knowledge or reality or society from the perspective of culture. For example, as I have already spoken about, how Walter Benjamin was talking about the work of art in the age of mechanical production, how Habermas was talking about the culture of the rise of public spaces, and how they would talk about the new age music, new age technology, much like you have in our own time. So, culture then becomes the tool, the object and the subject of analysis. To remind you, to understand the nature or the natures of cultural studies, you have to understand these two poles. They are related. One is cultural studies emphasis on interdisciplinarity or transdisciplinarity as against the traditional subjects or disciplines. Second is its emphasis on cultural analysis, where it emphasizes on, asserts on culture only, culture as an open category. Now, I will take you to my slides and then try to analyze the natures and the characteristics of cultural studies. Also, in my slides towards the end, I will give examples of certain events or social issues through pictures, and I will tell you how those pictures can also be analyzed from the perspective of cultural studies. So, I will take you to my slides now. As you can see, my dear students, on your screen, this was the Frankfurt School in Germany 1923, and then they would move to America and then come back to Germany also, but these were some of the texts which were quite significant in the theorization of media and communication or the culture in Germany. The first is the work of art in the age of mechanical production. As you can see, this is by Walter Benjamin, written in 1935. And then you have in 1937 Max Horkheimer, very prominent cultural theorist, sociologist also, known for his book called Traditional and Critical Theory. He opposes the traditional theories which accepted things and took things for granted, but he talks about how we need to have critical theory, not to accept at its face value, but to question and interrogate it. Then you have Dialectic of Enlightenment by Max Horkheimer and Theodor Adorno, coming in 1947, and then you have public space. Many of you might have heard about public space nowadays, because public space is much in discourse even in the public domain. So, therefore, Jürgen Habermas would write this book called The Structural Transformation of the Public Sphere in 1962, but these are not the only books that the Frankfurt School gave birth to. There were also many other books on the onslaught of communication, the kinds of hedonistic music, hedonistic fashion that was coming up. And these books would be, some of them would be written in German and they would be translated into English, and these translated German books of Frankfurt School would be followed heavily, relied on heavily by the cultural critics in the Birmingham Center for Contemporary Cultural Studies, and that is how cultural studies would be augmented or would be galvanized, not only in England, not only in Europe, but in other parts of the world also. So, this was the Frankfurt School, and next to Frankfurt School, as I have already spoken about, you had the BCCCS, and three prominent critics were considered to be the trinity of the founding fathers of cultural studies, and they are Richard Hogarth, known for his book called The Uses of Literacy, having a subtitle. In 1957, you had Culture and Society by Raymond Williams, published in 1958, and the third one is E. P. Thompson, known for his working class history, history of the rise of English working class, published in 1963. So, Hogarth, Williams and Thompson would be called as the trinity of the founding fathers of CCCS. This is what would be called by Bill Schwartz in his article called Where is Cultural Studies, published in 1994. You can see on your screen. So, you had Richard Hogarth, you had Williams and you had Thompson in 1957, 1958, 1963, and they would be called as the trinity of the founding fathers by Bill Schwartz in his article called Where is Cultural Studies, published in 1994. We are not going to talk about these books in detail, because we have another lecture in this SOEM course on these three individual founders of cultural studies in BCCCS, but with this I will take you to talk in detail about how cultural studies came as a reaction against the traditional definition or the hegemony, academic hegemony of the traditional disciplines or subjects. We will discuss more about cultural studies, such interdisciplinary characters in the slide that is in front of you on your screen. So, one of the nature of cultural studies is it is basically pedagogic in nature, canonical in nature, having an educational mission with practical purpose, and the base of cultural studies is basically cultural materialism, not historical materialism, as Karl Marx would say. instead of depending on Marx's emphasis on money, wealth, economy or materials, which would be the point of reference for his criticism, cultural studies relies more not on material only, but on the cultural aspects of the material, which is called cultural materialism in place of historical materialism. And while dealing with this, cultural studies is radical in its nature. It does not accept, rather it challenges, it interrogates and it questions. And also cultural studies believes in being institutionalized even in the universities and colleges. And this is against the idea that cultural studies, because it deals with culture, is not serious or it is trivial. So, against this loose public perceptions of cultural studies for being too cultural or being trivial, cultural studies emphasizes on or asserts on being institutionalized. That is how we have cultural studies in our universities and colleges. So, it is not a trivial work, but it is a serious interdisciplinary work, because cultural studies questions the cognitive hegemony of the disciplinarians or the academicians. It tries to dismantle the subject hierarchy or stratification of different disciplines and subjects. So, it questions, it subverts the cognitive authority or the subjective authority of individual or respective subject. So, it is a serious academic task rather than being trivial. And it is also is not one thing, cultural studies is not one thing, but it is embodiment of many things. It is pluralistic in nature. It is accommodative. It does not exclude or discriminate any subject. It accommodates, it accepts, it includes. And therefore, it is not one discipline or one subject like physics or economics or like law or literature, but it is embodiment or conglomeration of all these, and that makes it as pluralistic. And cultural studies is not considered a field in and of itself, like other subjects would claim that economics has its own methods, own area, scope, objective, which are different from other subjects, or it itself is a unique method or a field. Similarly, political science will claim or literature would claim, but cultural studies does not believe in such claims of being a separate, unique, distinct field. Rather, as we have already spoken about, cultural studies is an open, expanding, evolving area. It includes rather than excludes, and it does not believe in any stratification or hierarchy or distinctiveness from other subjects. Cultural studies therefore can be interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary. I will show you the slides to let you know what is transdisciplinary and what is multidisciplinary and what is interdisciplinary. Cultural studies therefore is a peopled research, a research based on the people, something like it is of the people, by the people and for the people. I am not talking about the political meaning of this, but how people are at the center of cultural studies, and how people are not only the object of studies, they are also means, or probably the common people can themselves be researchers, which Antonio Gramsci talks about as organic intellectuals who can come from any strata of the society, as against the traditional intellectual who only come from one particular class of being educated aristocratic class. So, people therefore are the center, the subject, the object, the means, even the researchers themselves. So, cultural studies is people centric, public centric, rather than being confined to confined to four walls of the classrooms like any other subjects. And this is what Marla Morris talks about. You can see cultural studies is interdisciplinary concept of model. All subjects, they come together, join hands to do the studies. So, cultural studies therefore is critical pedagogy which strives to transform the classrooms into social laboratories, and the intention of combining or transforming classrooms from a canonical, well defined, separated private sphere into a uncanonical, open, liberal and public spaces, and in this place they create new cultural spaces for innovations, for discoveries, for more public oriented and knowledge or ideas or theories. Now, I will take you to the slides. I will use some pictures to explain what is multidisciplines and what is interdisciplines or what is transdisciplines as areas of studies. As you can see, my dear students, for example, if health is a problem which needs to be solved, then we have all these disciplinary approaches. We have a multidisciplines, let us say medicine would come, economics would come, politics would come, literature would come. So, all these subjects studying into health independently without being connected can be individual vegetables. You can see these vegetables lying on the basket, but they are individual, they have their individual identity. You can eat these and maybe cure your sickness and get good health. So, this is called multidisciplines, where you have each discipline distinct from, separate from other discipline. Here discipline stands for vegetables or vegetable stands for disciplines. Now, still your health is a problem to be solved, and there are other disciplines as I have spoken about. So, all other disciplines can come together, join hands and probably find a solution to health. For example, the same vegetables are put in this pizza, and you can see the vegetables are there, but they do not look like as they looked here, intact, separate, distinct. Here they have lost some of their identity, yet you can see some vegetables, but they are united probably with this pizza crust or whatever it is called. So, this is called interdisciplines. Disciplines are there, but in sync, in unison with other disciplines, and together you can eat pizza and can cure your sickness or hunger. Yet there is another approach to solve this problem. For example, the same vegetables, all these vegetables can be cooked as soup, and you can drink the soup and probably cure your health or hunger. Now, here you do not have distinctive characteristics or identity of vegetable, it is melted, it is you do not have disciplinary boundary here. Here boundary was distinct, here boundary was blurred, and here boundary is gone. So, this is called transdisciplines, this is called interdisciplines, uniting hands with other disciplines, multidisciplines standing alone and working on the same. The problem is common to all, but the methods are different. For example, if these are disciplines, as you can see, not united, multidisciplinary, again their identities are distinct. Interdisciplinary, this is the A intersection B if you are from mathematics department, and in transdisciplinary you have nothing, no, these independent boundaries are not there, it is melted. So, that is what, my dear students, you understand interdisciplinarity or transdisciplinarity, and the cultural critics, they emphasize on these approaches to studies as against the distinct, separate, isolated, linear, strict, well defined methods, positivist attitude towards problems. Cultural studies with its birth would blur that boundary or bridge the gap or gaps that were created to separate each disciplines. So, it would bridge and bring in interdisciplinarity, and this is the nature of cultural studies. Now, I will take you to the next significant nature of cultural studies, that is how cultural studies relies on cultural analysis. Now, let us go to the slide. As you can see, cultural studies therefore is a paradigmatic shift from literature, mere literature as ideas, as aesthetics, as value neutral, to culture. So, it is objects plus practices with the objects. So, this is together is called culture. Okay. So, the focus of research and study in cultural studies is not literature, words, idle reading or ideal reading, to culture, that is to such materials as literature is also there, media, popular culture, newspapers, advertising, textbooks and others. As you can see how this was in 2014, how this was in hot news, and everybody looked at this issue of in America. Cultural studies is cultural analysis, that is close reading and studies of texts and events, and these texts, my dear students, are not literary texts. Anything, your comments, your SMS, your reels, your Facebook posts or pictures or some events on the roads, as well as many other cultural practices can be the texts of analysis. So, it analyzes the culture or the circuits of culture, that is the politics of production of culture, consumption of culture, identity, regulation and signification. Stuart Hall calls this as circuit of culture in his book, which we will discuss in the next subsequent lectures. And cultural studies, another feature is about worldliness, about our living life, not idle separated life in privacy, but our tryst, our encounters, our interrelationship, our activities, our attitudes in this world. So, it is our politics of life, what is called worldliness, and it is an investigation into cultural materialism. I have already spoken about it. Therefore, cultural studies debunks or opposes any hierarchies of culture. It does not distinguish what is called high culture or low culture or good culture or bad culture or what is decent or indecent. No. For it, it is the culture, not what kind of culture or kinds of culture. So, it does not believe in hierarchy of subjects or disciplines. Similarly, cultural studies does not believe in the hierarchy of cultures, because hierarchy of cultures promote hierarchies, stratification, exploitation, discrimination, anomalies and conflicts. So, if you study into the working class culture, probably there is a solution towards the class conflicts, and that is why E.P. Thompson wrote that book, History of the Rise of the English Working Class, in 1963, and for the first time he would bring in the idea of representing the working class, the subalterns, in the historiography, borrowing the word subaltern from Antonio Gramsci. In fact, Gramsci would be ever present in cultural theorists or the theories or their analysis of cultural studies. So, history from below is something that you might have heard has its roots in the nature and in the methodologies of cultural studies. Similarly, therefore, cultural studies is a fully responsible cultural studies. It is not casual, it is not trivial, it is not without any responsibility, but it is full of responsibilities, and it aims to be, please remember, analytically constructive, to analyze in order to construct new theories, new models, new solutions, at the same time constructively analytic. That analysis which would emerge from a particular methodology, particular approaches. So, analysis and constructions are synonymous and quite significant in cultural analysis. Therefore, cultural studies is not apolitical, like you think about, let us say literature is for pleasure, for aesthetics, for beauty. It cannot be taken as a serious source of our worldliness or our political or social or cultural problems. No, cultural studies on the other hand takes everything to be political. Okay, is not apolitical, that means it is political, and it is but a political pedagogical performance and praxis. It is not just a study, but it is actions, activities, or what is called performances or praxis. So, it proposes problem oriented theories, not idealistic theories or value neutral theories or apolitical theories or what is called secular in a way theories, but they are problem oriented theories and methods rather than mere generalizations. Therefore, cultural studies attempts at developing both practical work on culture as well as the theoretical models of its explanations, and that is what the theorists at the Frankfurt School did, and that is why Frankfurt School is also known as Frankfurt School of Critical Theory. And Max Horkheimer wrote that book called Traditional Theories and Critical Theories. So, you are analyzing, studying into the cultures, whatever cultures are there, good or bad, small or big, local or local or global, whatever you are studying, your studies in plural are intended towards bringing in insight, theoretical formulations which can be applied further in future or then to the social problems. That is how theory works. So, you have Orientalism, you have animal studies theory, you have disability studies, you have environmental theories, and these would be the offshoots of cultural studies and particularly phenomenology. Obviously, phenomenology we will discuss later on. So, if you have to look at all the cultures and find solutions, and at the absence of rigorous discipline, particular definition of rules, regulations of research, then you are free to use your own critical or cognitive power and you become creative. So, cultural studies promotes creativity and innovations, and that is how you have this thing called do it yourself. So, it is not that your professors or the experts can invent thing, create thing or be intellectual or creative. No, if you remember nowadays, my dear students, common people, ordinary people are more creative, and sometimes they give very pertinent, appropriate, very objective comments on social issues. Cultural studies respects those creative involvement or activities or contributions of the public. So, everybody can be a potential intellectual in the domain of cultural studies. So, DIY, that is do it yourself, is one of the slogans of cultural studies, being creative, being innovative. This is another nature of cultural studies. Nevertheless, my dear students, as you can see on your screen, suppose this is an image. Now, this image, as you can see, is about plastic pollutions in the marine water or in the sea. So, you can bring, obviously then this should be the subject of a marine biologist or a scientist, or let us say somebody from the social sciences or other things, but this can also be the subject of literature people, people from other disciplines also. So, when all the disciplines are together, they can study into these plastic pollutions, and this therefore is the subject of not only the marine biologist or the environmentalist or the scientists, but also most pertinently it can be subject or potentially subject of cultural studies. Look at this, this meme is about online classes and how people have created a meme. So, a student is being asked, how was the online classes for you? What did you get from it? What did you get? and the student answers, you know what I got? I got headache on a jocular vein, I got back pain, I got eye sores, and I got a swollen eye also. Now, this is a picture which talks about the massive culture of online classes that happened during the COVID-19, but then this meme is not apolitical, this meme is not value neutral, this meme is not trivial, but this is a serious technological text to be thought about, and this can be thought from cultural perspective. Similarly, here you have artificial intelligence very much in vogue now and very much in discourses now, like ChatGPT, whether it is good or bad, but nevertheless AI is not this, should not be the subject of the computer engineers, but it is also part of the academicians like the literature people, social sciences and other things. So, who will look into this new culture of AI, not the computer scientists only, but how cultural critics, theorists can also look into it. Similarly, if you can see, this is a picture from Feministic in Africa, and this picture was also awarded internationally. So, this picture can be the site not only of international politics or famine or poverty, but of humanities, ethics, photography, international relations, diplomacy, hunger, anything. So, no more it is part of photography, part of journalism, but part of critical discourses also. So, that is how you have do it yourself concept. In the cultural studies, you are free floating intellectual, anybody can be an intellectual, edge against the traditional intellectual. So, this is how we come to know about the natures and the characteristics of cultural studies as preliminary ideas to understand the further aspects of cultural studies, which we will discuss elaborately in the subsequent chapters, but for you these are the references, probably you can look into it and go and read on your own. So, with this we come to the end of this first lecture of this OM course called Aspects of Cultural Studies. With this, I take this opportunity to thank you. Thank you very much.